sexual relations.
And I realized that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, Cleveland. Welcome this morning. Another Backfire with John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey.
Good morning.
Hey, guys.
How are you? We got a couple of special guests in the studio this morning. Mr. Tom Cry.
Good morning.
And Bob Burris.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Anyway, I guess we have to start talking about the dogs and the cats and so forth around Cleveland. Kind of open up the show here with the, what do they call that? The SPCA? What's that stand?
Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
Okay, and that's the official name.
That's the national name of a umbrella organization.
It's a national organization. Our local one is a sort of a chapter, I guess.
How do we give it back to the national? Anyway, we got some real problems up there with this thing. You know, this $80,000 bid that was going to run it in half the year, 6 months' time, they're out of money. And
well, apparently, from reading the articles that have been in the paper, the thought process was that they would somehow be able to raise money apart from the contract, and that's how they would cover additional expenses. But that doesn't appear to have materialized so far.
I think that was supposed to amount to about $20,000 a month, if I'm not mistaken. Tom,
I understand that $20,000 was the figure thrown out, that contributions, donations that would supplement what the county put in. We appear to have a lack of understanding on how to read a contract when you sign it and then follow through on the contract after you've signed it, on the implementation of it. So we have some serious issues with the animal control.
Do you think they're a breach of contract? Franklin, you're an attorney. What's the opinion?
Well, it's not clear to me what the contract required them to do from that standpoint. They were supposed to take over county animal control issues. I don't know if the contract actually required them to achieve this no-kill status or not. That's not clear to me, although that seems to be a goal in the contract.
I think the biggest issues they had with the contract was they were supposed to be able to take animals, and that they put a sign on the door that said, "We're closed."
Well,
but that's the break in the contract.
But that was a secondary issue to other things that, when you have a contract, both sides of the contract have to agree to try to work towards the ends of the goals of that contract. And then in this particular case, it's just not just the two sides, but it's the overall community at large. And you did have a lot of fussing and fighting inside the community at large. Like, for example, you say, if part of their idea was we can raise X amount of dollars per month, if you've got people out here criticizing you, telling people you suck in the public's realm, it's going to be difficult to raise that money.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to go back to where I was last week. I just think this is the perfect example of where something wasn't broke, but we still tried to fix it. And this is what's happening.
I agree, and from that standpoint, it's something we've talked about a long time. I don't want bigger government. I don't want a metro government here, but there are areas where we could save money by trying to combine services that make sense. This was one that was already combined. It made sense, but you have people that say, by God, we're the county and they're the city and they hate us and we hate them and we're going to fix it. It's the same thing as the fire department. We're spending 2 or 3 times what they told us an independent fire department was going to cost, simply because they couldn't figure out a way to cooperate with the city.
Well, I think the city commission, probably the smartest people in the world, they got rid of this problem, and now it's in the county's lap again. Is that a good comment to make?
I from one point of view, I think you're correct. They got rid of it, but the issue evolves, I feel, around the no-kill portion of it. The city's good at that no-kill thing. They can spend $11 million on a gymnasium. They can buy Ford SUV police interceptor engines for the fire department inspectors. So they've got plenty of money. In the county, the contract didn't say anything about no kill. It said you would handle the animals. Now, if they can't handle the animals, I agree with Mr. Yarber. They're in violation of the contract. Put them on 30-day notice, and we will get ourselves an animal control, and we'll take care of the animals. Now, they need to start cooperating and get on with business.
Let me. I'm always the one that doesn't know when to keep my mouth shut.
No comment.
I've actually heard that somewhere before.
Hold on.
If you said something like that.
Let me ask the uncomfortable question that no politician wants to ask, because you don't want to make a bunch of people mad at you. Look, I grew up with all kinds of pets. I've had doves. I've had pigeons. We've had chickens. I've had dogs. I've raised rabbits my whole life. I've always had white doves for my magic shows. I love my animals. I have places around the barn where we've buried them, and I put crosses up for their burial. I cried when they died. I love my animals. But folks, while we might strive for a no-kill animal shelter, if you don't have an active and really sort of an airtight spade and neuter program, it is impossible to say that you're going to place every single stray animal that comes along. You've got one animal out there, you don't take care of that animal, next thing you know, they just had 4 pups or 7 pups or 10 pups. So the idea that we as the taxpayer, what are we going to do? We're going to have a zoo of 10,000 dogs and cats at some point?
Well, I did some checking around last day or two about this issue to see what was happening prior to this contract going into. We had not achieved no-kill status at the city-run animal shelter, but we'd made a huge stride toward that.
There's one thing about trying.
What we had gotten down to, and this is just a fact, we had gotten down to about 12 animals being put down a month there. We hadn't, which is, when you think about the thousands of animals that we're dealing with, 144 for the year is pretty darn good. So I just don't understand why pride doesn't get swallowed and people don't back up and go, let's go back to what we were doing.
Well, I think sometimes you get the wrong people in charge of things, and I'm not going to specifically put out any names.
I'm not doing that. I'm saying there was a goal to try and save some money. It's a noble goal. In this particular case, it's one that didn't work.
All right. Tom Cry, I'm going to ask you a question since you're going to be on the county commission soon. Should the county commission just go back to the city and put this deal back together? Now, I think if I'm not mistaken, the city had agreed to negotiate, and it was going to be about $100,000 savings overall, and that still wasn't good enough for the county when they went out here and took this thing on.
I feel if you lay a spreadsheet out, you'll see a consistent rise in the cost of running that city animal shelter. If they will agree to cooperate and negotiate, I have no problem with it, but I'm not in the mood to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. And we will negotiate, or I'm willing to cooperate and go along with that. However, we're not going to spend no $500,000-$600,000 a year or $200,000, whatever it is, on a wasted program. You put that amount with their amount, and you're dealing with a lot of money. In
other words, you just soon buy them a couple of 22s. That'd be the best solution. I'm not
for having a firing range out at the landfill. I'm not contemplating or promoting that. I'm promoting animal control if they can't do their job. I'm all for taking care of the animals. I'm all for people adopting animals. But I don't feel that you need to pick up a stray, send him to the vet and spend $100, and then put him back in there for adoption, and he stays 2 weeks, no one adopts him, and the taxpayers are stuck with the fee. I'm not for that. I'm for taking care of the problem. If there's an issue out here, let's take care of it and move on.
Now, I got to ask you one question. You've had pets. Now, John admitted he cried when they died. Have you ever cried when yours died?
I've had... I'm retired from the military in Okinawa. I had a Doberman Pinscher, to protect my family. I had a German Shepherd in Nebraska to protect my family. I took care of them. I spent hundreds of dollars on them. I made sure they had safe homes when I transferred to another location. I've also had for my grandchildren, I've had small pets. I don't have any now. At my age, I like to travel a little bit and not spend $15 to $20 a day boarding fee, but I don't have any now. I believe if you have a personal responsibility to take care of that animal, there are guidelines on what you should do, but if you're not capable of taking care of it, someone else has to.
Now, wait a minute. I didn't ask that. I asked you, that sounded like a Franklin Chancey answer. That I asked you if you ever cried when they died.
Oh, I thought you were throwing a pun at me. No, I have not cried when they died. I have seen human beings murdered in Vietnam, and I've cried over that, but I have not cried over an animal.
I've got to say
let me, just so apparently I'm the crybaby on the panel. Let me say that my memory of pets goes back to a small child, so I'm not real prone to crying a lot. Although I will tell you, I've got probably a 10 or 12-year-old Rottweiler, and we love him, and when he dies, I probably will shed a tear. But my point just is, they make these things litmus tests. Well, if you don't support a no-kill shelter, you hate animals. You can love animals and still actually see the reality here. And the reality here is, like Franklin said, you strive towards no-kill. But my point here is, you'll see them fuss about one animal or two animals, and you're like, my goodness, they're doing a pretty good job compared to what we used to do. We used to do, if you didn't go over to the shelter in about 2 days, your dog was dead.
Yeah. Anyway, my dog, I've got to tell you one of my dog stories. I had this dog named Laddie. Now, that was my favorite dog. And I'm telling you, that dog, I don't think it ever went to a veterinarian in its entire life. But it was there for me every time I needed it. It protected me in my yard. Some old boy and I got in a fight one day, and old Laddie was all over that old boy because he was in my yard fighting me. But anyway, Laddie disappeared one time. We'd had Laddie a long time, and disappeared. And finally, we found Laddie. Laddie was laying on the side of Georgetown Road, and I talked to an old guy that was out there, and he said, yep, he said, I saw him get hit. Said he was actually chasing some little old young girly dog across the road there and just didn't quite get there in time. So Laddie lived a good life and died a good life, is the way I look at it. And I did cried when he died.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, Lord.
We're up on election day here, and I'd like to ask John to give us some insight. I'm not asking who he supports, but I am curious what he thinks, how he assesses the status of the two congressional races that affect Bradley County, the Tracy and Desjardins race and the Flashman-Wamp race, which both seem to me to be pretty hotly contested.
Go ahead.
Well, I think the Flashman and Wamp race is going to be tough. I've talked to people out of Hamilton County. Some of them say that Weston is going to win Hamilton County pretty big, which he certainly, I think, has a really good shot at. Others say no, and then they'll always throw in and say, well, Anderson County is what elected Chuck to begin with, and he'll do really well in Anderson. But I can tell you that Weston has worked really, really hard. Now, Chuck has too, and Chuck's had to be in Washington at times. But that's a really tight race, and there are people this time, because it's a two-man race, there are people this time that think Weston could have a shot of taking that. The Desjardins and Tracy race, the conventional wisdom is that Jim Tracy's going to win that. Now, from what I've been reading, and some of this is actually coming out of people in Washington, D.C. as well, they feel like Desjardins has come back up a little bit, and that's why you saw some of the negative campaign reminders of some of the problems Desjardins has had from the Tracy campaign. But the conventional wisdom still is that they think Tracy, with the amount of money that he has, will probably win that.
I noticed there's a really large ad that's been bought in the Chattanooga Times with a whole bunch of people that would generally be considered Republicans who are against Flashman in this case. It's a pro-WAMP ad, but it's more focused on some complaints about Chuck Flashman. So I was just really interested.
It's talking about negative campaigning. I have a real problem with the direction we're going with negative campaigning talk in this country. If I call you a scumbag, or if I imply that you beat your wife, for me, that's negative campaigning. If I say you voted for this bill, or you voted against that bill, or you were convicted of, bribery, for me, that's not negative campaigning. And we've become, think about this, for a country that can't even call a guy who straps a bomb to his chest and blows up 50, other people in a market square, we can't call him a terrorist anymore. Apparently, if we can't do that, we sure can't say, hey, this guy's a liberal or this guy's a conservative. So I don't like the tone where we want to elect people purely on, oh, he's a nice guy. Your record's your record. And as far as I'm concerned, if your opponent publicizes your record, your on the record statements or your votes on pieces of legislation, that is not negative campaigning. Now, part of what WAMP is talking about is a lot of Chucks are just sort of, he's this arrogant little kid and we don't like him, which is personal attacks. And so there's a difference between a personal attack and an actual here's your record attack.
Well, I haven't kept up with that campaign. I've watched two things. I watched Scotty Mayfield's commercial talking about WAMP, which stated that he had a microphone or something in his pocket and recorded.
I'm not defending that, but it's not illegal. And I will tell you, like in my case, I don't say anything in private that I'm not willing to say in public. So that defense for me doesn't hold a lot of water, because part of me just looks at it and goes, whether you record it or not, did you say it or not? Is it true or not?
Then what was it? WAMP's latest ad was that he did something to a picture.
Oh, no, it was a Photoshop picture of his face. They Photoshopped a hand into it of him holding a passport with a lighter burning the passport and saying he supported illegal immigration. And by most accounts, that was a pretty far stretch of what he actually said. He said we need to find a path for these people to become citizens. Now, that's not the same thing as supporting amnesty. Now, I will tell you, Weston had a pretty slick line up in Monroe County this weekend. He walked up to the podium. This was at the Jim Miller barbecue, big gathering, Republican gathering up there. And he said, hi, I'm Weston WAMP. I'm sure most of you have probably seen me in one of Congressman Flashman's ads. And it was, I will have to say, it was a pretty slick little line.
I don't know where he gets his money. Where would Mr. WAMP get that kind of money, you think, that he's spending on this campaign? People just donate it to him?
No, one of the founders of the company he works for, what was it, $300,000?
Something like that, yeah.
Gave him $300,000?
Just about 3 weeks ago.
$300,000.
That company's not an Obamacare company, is it?
No.
That's what I keep hearing.
Well, I don't know.
No, he doesn't work for a healthcare company.
They just do PR and consulting.
It's a PR.
Oh, it's a public relationship.
No, not really. It's a startup. They've got a lot of businesses.
It's a startup public relationship.
They've helped businesses start their business.
I don't think there's any.
So it's a business that never has done business that helps other businesses start businesses.
I don't think there's any doubt, but that he has parlayed connections that his father had made into campaign support.
Is that the same organization?
Would that be a surprise to somebody?
No.
Yeah, wouldn't to me.
Is that the same company in Nashville that was one of the organizers was Weston's father? And then they donated $300,000 to a PAC in Virginia, and then it shot right straight back into the campaign. Are we talking about the same?
No, his company's out of Chattanooga, and this is simply one of the owners of the company put $300,000 into it. Well, they did put it in a PAC because you can't give that much money. It has to go through a PAC.
Yeah.
But that's the campaign finance laws.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? We're on the same topic. We've, again, not who you're for. I'm not asking you that. How do you assess the local state representative race?
I haven't found anybody that wants to make a prediction on that. They all think it's very, very tight.
This is the Adam Lowe, Dan Howell race.
They think that Meigs County may be leaning towards Dan Howell. They think that Polk County may be leaning towards Adam Lowe, and they think the race is won or lost in Bradley, and nobody seems to have a real good feel for where that's at. Now, turnout will have a lot to do with it. Turnout's low because we don't have
about 8,000 in early voting.
Yeah, we don't have a contested race. In any county that doesn't have a contested, to be honest, doesn't have a contested sheriff's race, you have depressed turnout, and that can affect this race.
Expecting a very large turnout in Polk County right now because they have a very hotly contested sheriff's race going on over there.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of sheriff's campaign signs up around Polk County.
Well, I think we'll elect the first Republican sheriff in Polk County in a good while up there.
I've heard some people suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Ross is a good man. He's from Cleveland. He's worked for the Cleveland Police Department for 24 years, I believe. Professional, educated, good man, and I think he'll be elected Republican sheriff in Polk County.
All right. What about Miss Lois Lerner? Any good news, hot news out on her this week?
No, not really. She's not in prison yet.
Well, that's the sad thing. But now, what was it she was calling the Republicans this week?
She called, I forget, pretty ugly names. I mean, it was clear.
An A at the beginning.
I mean,
and a hole at the end.
It's clear that she
proper English would be anal passage or something.
It's clear that she certainly was not an unbiased person, and for her to be in the job that she was in, scrutinizing organizations that have political leanings, for her to be that uncontrollable in her personal opinion tells you that. And of course, she had this same problem when she worked at the Federal Election Commission. She did some of the same things there before she came to the IRS.
Well, I'm not exactly defending her, but I'm just clarifying something here. The emails that you're talking about were not business IRS emails.
But they were at the IRS during business hours.
Well, one of them, she was on a trip. She was in a different country.
On IRS trip. On the taxpayer dime.
Well, I'm not sure
Which
about
is
that
a
part.
Hatch Act violation, is it not?
If you're campaigning, it is.
Actually, political
She
activity.
She wasn't campaigning. She was actually making a comment about talk radio hosts, not about any of these organizations that she was.
She said Republicans.
But the conversation was about talk hosts on radio.
But she
not
said,
about any of the organizations she was supposedly making decisions.
Now, Franklin,
saying,
I know, but come on, Franklin. She is in charge of deciding who gets tax exempt status and who doesn't. And anybody on business hours who can't control herself any better than that shows herself to be biased, completely biased. And it is a Hatch Act violation, these emails that she sent. But they don't say campaigning in the Hatch Act. They say partisan activity.
Should we have a special prosecutor?
Absolutely.
What's the holdup?
Well, because the president believes there was not a smidgen of corruption here.
Not a smidgen of corruption. Especially after she says things like this, you think there's a smidgen of corruption?
There's a
Not
hell of a lot more
so
here.
Far, but
there's a hell of a lot more here than there was with Nixon's IRS, and that was actually the main impeachment article for Nixon.
What I understand, she was after a group run by Karl Rove.
Well, she was after a lot of groups, but yeah. Now, the thing about the group with Karl Rove, though, is...
How much is this
smidgen? Where did that come from? That she was out for this group run by Karl Rove. Where did that come from?
Crossroads.
I know what group we're talking about, but what evidence was that? I haven't seen anything about that.
Well, we can't find anything. We can't get them to answer any answer.
We're
finding bits and pieces.
This email that you got was something the government provided. They're looking for it and providing it.
Actually, they only provided it when a federal judge forced them to provide it. They've done everything they can to put this off. And here's the modus operandi of this administration. If you can put it off long enough, then you can go, well, guys, that was 2 years ago. And to be honest, the public has such a short memory. They've gotten away with a lot of scandals that personally I think were terrible scandals. Each and every one individually were horrible scandals. You know, the gun running scandal that they did down in Mexico is a terrible scandal, but they put it off. By the way, they've now lost their executive privilege charge. A federal judge has said the executive privilege that the White House exerted on Fast and Furious was illegal and has demanded that they produce the documents, which, by the way, they are not complying with the federal judge's order at this point.
And they won't. I tell you what, I don't know.
Do you believe federal judges' orders should be complied with, Franklin?
Sure, John.
Why doesn't the White House think they have
Well,
to?
is that one under appeal?
No, I don't.
I
not
think
yet.
it is. Yeah, it is, which is fairly typical.
Okay.
I don't want to get anything else started before we take a break. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You need money overnight? Check into cash. Your time is tight. .com. Bank account's too low? Check into cash. So where do you go? .com. Do it online in a record time. It's the easy way to get money next day. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. Just stay in the house, check into cash, and grab your mouse.com. Get your money online, check into cash, right on time.com. You can be sure it's secure from our bank straight to yours. Do a quick click from home at checkintocash.com. No time to get away, check into cash. You gotta stay home.com. Hey, that's okay, check into cash. You can do it alone.com. Any old time, do it online. Just stay in the house and grab your mouse. Do a quick click from home. Get your money overnight at the right website. Do a quick click from home. Go to checkintocash.com.
Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy or sell or apply today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
My name is Vicki Lee. 16 years ago, my son was murdered by a stranger on meth while standing in his own driveway. I am thankful for people like Sandra Donaghy, a person that does her job. She treats people with respect and dignity. She listens to hurting families. And I know, had it not been for Sandra Donaghy making sure this person was punished by law, this man would have walked. I know families that suffer because of justice not being done. Thank you, Sandra Donaghy, for all you do.
My name is Sandra Donaghy, and I approve this message.
From checking to cash, they're coming to town. Mighty Clydesdales of world renown. Such a rare sight, all black and white. Big excitement all around.
Check into Cash, your one-stop money shop, introduces the Cashdales, our beautiful Clydesdale horses now touring the United States, representing our company heritage, appearing in parades, events, and visiting Check into Cash locations.
2,000 pounds marching around, every hoofbeat shaking the ground. Tall as the sky, 18 hands high, they're gentle giants, so don't be shy.
Check into Cash, now celebrating 20 years, is proud to present the beautiful Clydesdale horses. Visit cashdales.com for the upcoming schedule and more information.
Check into Cash, they're on their way. The mighty Clydesdales will make your day.
Ah, the sounds of summer. If you had a pool, from Matthews Pool and Spa Company, 902 Sahara Drive in Cleveland, Tennessee. Call them at 423-476-4521 and get the pool or spa of your dreams. Do it now, Cleveland. Locally owned and operated for over 25 years right here in Cleveland, Tennessee, with over 75 years of total experience in the installation of pools and spas. So check out Matthews Pool and Spa for your new pool, spa, or any accessories you may need for a pool or spa you already have. Check them out here in Cleveland on Sahara Drive, 476-4521. Look out, kids, I'm going to jump. Woo!
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back live in the studio of Backfire. Welcome back. We've got a big crew in here. We've got John Stanberry, Franklin Chansey, Tom Crime, Bob Burris this morning. Welcome, everybody.
I like to think that we're developing a cheering section for us here.
So you all are cheering for all the Republicans that are going to be elected on Thursday?
Not hardly.
We just got one, not hardly. Where's the other one?
Well, we only have two here. We got 50%.
Hey, audience is the best part.
You know, if you bet 500, you go to the Hall of Fame. So.
You know, I guess we can talk about judges this morning. First of all, I want to congratulate Judge George McCohen. Yesterday we had lunch together, and he came in to meet us, and I told everybody at our table to rise. Anyway, George McCohen's a great guy, and he has volunteered to take this judgeship for a short period of time until they, I guess,
the city council decided they weren't going to vote on a permanent one until after the election, so that if somebody who's currently on it lost, they would the new person would have an opportunity to weigh in.
Which I want to say, I think that's a very honorable position for them to take. I mean, you know, they very easily could have appointed whoever they wanted to and
could have done it legally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and I think that's very honorable on their part.
My understanding, there's about 5 people wanting that position. I don't know, 5 attorneys here in town.
Well, I haven't heard that many names. I've heard 2 or 3, but
4 or 5. What type of? I mean, I don't know. What does something like that pay?
My recollection was it was $3,000 or something like that a month, like that.
I don't think it's that much. I've heard.
It's not a huge salary. It's not something you retire on.
I've heard 2 numbers: one $14,000 plus a year, one $12,000 plus a year. I don't know what it's a part-time job, two nights a week or 2 days a week for a couple of hours. But I think it also provides insurance, and it gets you into the state retirement system. I don't know, most of these attorneys like Franklin here make so much money that shouldn't be an issue, but as far as George McCohen goes, I find him to be a tremendous individual, very busy, and why he would take on this outside of just doing it for the community's good is beyond me, because I'm fully aware of how busy a person he is, and that's really great of him to do it.
So you're saying that George is a really great guy, you know, as opposed to Franklin.
No, I didn't mean to imply that at all. I didn't see. I haven't seen Franklin's name in the hopper for 5. So anyone that can travel to Paris and all over Europe and these other places, they really don't need that 14,000.
That was a Backfire fact finding.
He's going to see what Pierre.
He was hoping he could revive the socialism that's killing France.
He went over for an orientation from the new socialist government, I'm sure, in Paris.
8,830 votes during early voting. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to predict that we have far fewer than that number vote on election day.
Yeah, I tell you what's hard about this. We're still in the middle of this process of more and more people moving over to early voting. So in the past, the first couple of years especially, what we did was we'd take that number and go, oh, well, only 30% vote in early voting, so we're going to have X total. You can't do that, because every year the percentage of people voting in early voting has been creeping up. So Franklin's probably right. I think you'll have a lot less.
I'm going to predict that the total vote in Bradley County is maybe 13 to 14,000.
13, 14. I agree.
Yeah, which is nothing to brag about.
But we don't have any active county mayors unopposed, the county sheriffs unopposed. If you don't have a mayor's race or a sheriff's race or something hot race like that, you just don't generate the kind of interest. Now, that doesn't mean that's a good thing. You know, in Iraq, they're still voting 60%, which is kind of embarrassing for us. So.
Well, it is embarrassing when they vote 60% and we vote 10%.
Well, and those percentages are on registered voters, not on total population. And if I'm not mistaken, the Iraq is not registered voters; it's total population that those percentages are based on.
I'm assuming it's eligible adults or something. Right. I don't know how old you have to be in Iraq.
Now,
but, I mean, clearly much better participation than we have.
Now, I'm going to say this and get this started. And I really
that is your job, you know.
We've got we've got guests in here this morning, And I don't want y'all yelling and screaming at each other, but I want to bring up, I brought up that George McCoy's doing a great deed serving as the judge. But what's the issue again about these judges? Now,
there's no issue. Vote no. Kick them all out of office.
All of them. I mean, when you go to vote, I went to early voting, and there was all these judges everywhere. I didn't know who half of them were, but there's a big issue now about the Democrat side.
There's a group of people who want to focus not on what kind of job somebody does, but on what party they're from. And that's never been the case in Tennessee. We've always tried to put good people onto our appellate courts. And in this particular case, I'll use the most local example, and I talked about it last week. There's a commission that evaluates judicial performance. 9 people are on this commission, and 8 of them are Republicans. 8 out of 9. And they unanimously voted to retain the most local one here, Justice Sharon Lee, who's from Monroe County here. All 9 of them, including the 8 Republicans, said that she's done a great job and ought to be retained.
All right.
And there's a group who just wants to throw them out.
Do you think
some nebulous?
Do y'all think they'll stay there forever?
No, wait a minute, Steve. Let me. I'm glad Franklin brought that up, because let me give you all a little bit of the rest of the story with that. They have a panel, and they voted on all of these judges, and those recommendations are all printed at taxpayer expense and put out there. But here's what's not printed. There were 3 of these judges that were actually voted by this panel do not retain. One of our own local judges serves on that committee, and before he could get to his car, he had lawyers and bar people and trial lawyer people calling him and saying, why did you vote this way? You need to change your vote. Now, here's the other thing. They took a provisional vote at first. Now, if you go through all the evidence, it would seem to me, why do you need to have a provisional vote? And after lobbying and pressure, then they re-voted, and magically, when they re-voted, everyone was voted to be retained. So when these guys get up here and say, oh, there's no partisanship in this, bull. They 3 of the guys would have been recommended by their own panel to be removed if not for political pressure from liberal trial lawyer groups and from the justices themselves.
Okay, Franklin, you go ahead.
Were you aware of that, Franklin?
No one could.
Were you aware of that?
So you're saying that our local judge here caved to political pressure from Democrats?
I don't know what happened. I don't know how
I don't buy that, Mike.
He probably voted
I think that story is just wrong.
The first time.
I just don't believe it. I don't believe Judge Mike Sharp here caved on his vote.
I didn't say Mike did.
Well, I don't know who you're talking about. It was unanimous. He voted for them. So I don't know what you're saying. There are some judges in Court of Appeals jobs that some members of that council cast votes that they not be retained. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about the Supreme Court justices.
I said all the judges. I didn't say the 3 Supreme Courts.
But they're getting the lion's share.
Well,
of this,
they're out here.
Where
multiple
they're
things.
Saying
First off, they're violating campaign finance laws as we speak. So here are judges that you're saying we should look at the job they're doing. Well, when they can't obey campaign finance laws, they've put a Facebook post up based on a PAC committee in May that wasn't even founded and formally registered until June. They've got campaign signs out that didn't have proper identification per campaign finance laws on the bottom. They're traveling together and endorsing each other. At the same time, we've got a judge up in Monroe County who's not even sworn in yet, and he's already had complaints filed against him because he was helping his friend get elected. He's not even a judge, and they're claiming, oh, he endorsed someone. These 3 are traveling the state endorsing people.
What we have is a very competent, and I would dare say conservative,
Are they
Supreme
competent
Court.
enough to follow campaign finance disclosure
I don't know that
laws?
I haven't seen any evidence they're violating.
Well, they have
anything.
signs I can show you a picture of with no disclosure on the bottom.
You're
That's
assuming
a violation
that they put those out.
Actually, they did. They admit they put them out.
I have no information to support that claim.
But
I will say this: if any of that's true, John, there'd be no reason for outside groups to be running campaign ads saying they've got something to do with Obamacare when they don't.
You mean outside groups like Soros, who's put thousands of dollars
As
into their
I've
campaign?
said repeatedly, John, I'm opposed to all outside groups.
All right, let's have an opinion from Tom Cry.
All right,
let's have Tom Cry's opinion.
I'm very unbiased here on this. I say kick them all out. I have for the past 20 years voted not to retain every single one that's on the ballot. I'm a firm believer that judges do not need lifetime appointments. They need a maximum of 10 years, and then they need to be replaced. They lose touch with the common people. They lose touch with society. They're sitting up there passing judgment on ordinary people with negative stuff in their mind, and they need to be replaced.
How long have these judges been in office?
Varying amounts. I mean, there's no...
So if we replaced them, or we got this legislative body to do something besides worrying about switchblade knives and damn drones over hunting areas, and get some good legislation on the appointment of our judicial branch and get it passed, we could solve this problem.
And Franklin, you talk about their job. So let's talk about their job. Victims' rights groups are incensed. For example, they have said that you can't even show a picture of the victim of a crime before the crime happened. So if you come in with a high school graduation picture of one of the victims, they said, oh, well, Franklin, you're shaking your head. Let me read it to you so you don't have to shake your head. Let me read it to you. This is Justice Gary Wade's own words.
Hold on a minute.
They typically lack relevance to the issues on trial, and because of their potential to unnecessarily arouse the sympathy of the jury. That's Justice Gary Wade's words.
That's right. The picture of the person doesn't have anything to do with the guilt of the person who committed the crime.
All right, here's another one. Justice Connie Clark doesn't think that the victim should be allowed to even address the jury because, in her words, the risk of inflaming a jury's passions with such testimony is simply too great to allow its admission.
Again, the issue in this case, and these cases that you're talking about, is not the victim's rights, because there is a portion of the process where victims get to participate, without question. But it's not in the part where you're trying to determine the guilt or innocence of somebody. That shouldn't be done based upon emotion. It should be done on facts.
So you don't think showing pictures of the victim, you think showing pictures of the, you agree with them that that's just too prejudicial?
I think there is a sentencing phase and there's a guilt phase. In the guilt phase, the pictures that you're talking about are invariably ones that are supposed to generate sympathy.
So what?
We want the jury to make factual determinations so we don't send innocent people to jail, or God forbid to the
What about the rights
penalty.
of the victim's family? I tell you what, Franklin, do you want to volunteer to be the one to go to all the victims and say, I'm sorry, we're too worried about the guy who raped and murdered your grandmother to let you say anything?
Well, that's because, there you have it though, John. You've decided people are guilty before they have a trial.
No.
That's the problem.
A victim's impact statement doesn't say anything about a victim's impact statement. No, I'm not missing it at all, Franklin.
Once an individual has been found guilty, they're allowed to put that evidence in.
All right.
These opinions you're writing about are not from the sentencing phase. They're from the guilt phase.
Okay, we're not going to resolve that in the studio this morning, so let's go to the next segment here.
Well, let me say one thing, though. On Monday,
Last thing, okay.
Chief Justice Wade was scheduled to appear at the Hamilton County Pachyderm Club and debate his tenure with State Senator Mike Bell, who was on this show last week.
Right.
He backed out and then didn't have the backbone to say, I backed out. They put out press releases that he was uninvited to the Hamilton County Pachyderm Club. Now, Justice Sharon Lee is on the radio talking about him being uninvited.
I will say this. Mike Bell did tell me in our studio last week he was going to be at the Pachyderm Club.
Well, she's on the radio Monday morning talking about how he was uninvited. The Hamilton County Pachyderm Club called in while she was on the radio and said, absolutely not. We did not uninvite him. He backed out. Folks, outside of all the other issues, a Chief Justice who doesn't have enough backbone to just admit that he did something, I don't think ought to be on the bench.
All right, let's change the subject here a minute. We've had enough about judgeships. Obama's administration is not to ever second guess me again, the Israeli Prime Minister lashes out and said. Why would he say something like that, you think? Why would the Obama administration second guess him?
We put pressure on them to halt what was going on in Gaza.
Well, how much pressure we put on Hamas to halt what they were doing?
Well, we were attempting to apply pressure.
Well, guess
to
what,
them.
Franklin? There's a picture from I think a French newscaster with a Hamas rocket launcher right next to the UN building in Gaza.
I don't doubt
launching
that at all.
rockets
I don't
right
doubt that
next
at all.
door to the UN
I don't
building.
doubt that at all, John.
UN schools twice now have been found to be storing rockets, and we're going to criticize Israel. As far as I'm concerned, Israel should do whatever they need to do to save their own country, which is what they're doing.
CNN was criticized online Friday morning after publishing a tweet appearing that suggests that Israel broke a 72-hour ceasefire brokered by the United Nations and the United States.
Franklin, let me ask you a question. When we were fighting Germany, were Germany's civilian casualty rates higher than ours?
Well, since the fighting wasn't in America, I assume so, John.
Well, has any country in the world been held to the standard that they have to keep the opposition civilian casualty rate lower than their civilian casualty rate? Has that standard been applied to anyone outside of Israel?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying,
let
John.
me put it in black and white. The point of a war is to make it so uncomfortable on the other side that they quit.
John, I'm not telling Israel they can't defend themselves.
Well, our president
No,
is.
he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, and here's the
He
problem.
has
Here's the
become
problem.
inconsequential in the Middle East.
Here is the problem. Well,
We
that's
are a
not true.
non-issue in the Middle East, Franklin.
He doesn't want us to second guess him again.
Actually, there's some amazing
Please
things
tell us
taking
how
place.
the world is safer after 5 years of Barack Obama. Please explain how the world is safer.
Well, we had something really fascinating happening over there, John. I don't know if you noticed, there were about a half a dozen Middle Eastern countries that were assisting Israel in this process. Now, that's unprecedented. How did that come about, John?
Well, maybe they need to let France and Denmark know while we've got anti-Semitism rallies going in the streets of
As
Europe.
I said, John, about a half a dozen Middle Eastern countries were taking Israel's side in this
Here's why.
process.
Let me explain
so
this
that
to
means
you.
that there's some really amazing
No,
things
there's nothing
happening over
amazing
there.
happening. Here's what it is. Nobody wants the Palestinians. Before Israel was formed, nobody offered land to the Palestinians. When Israel was formed, half the land was divided up for the Palestinians, and they refused to take it. This is their bed from start to finish. I don't feel sorry for them, and anybody that does feel sorry for them, including our Secretary of State, is crazy.
It's not a question of being sorry for somebody.
We're inconsequential in the Middle East because
It's
of
a
his
question
policies, Franklin.
of to what degree our interests have been negatively impacted
What are our
over the years.
interests? That's the problem. What are our interests?
Well, unfortunately, John, the true answer would be that our interests are oil, number one.
You think so?
Well, I think
Franklin,
that's a
that
big
is
part of it.
absolute. How much oil did we get out of the Iraq invasion that you and all the liberals said we were going for? How much did we get?
I didn't say we were getting oil out
You
of it.
said that whole war was for
No,
oil.
no, wait a minute, John.
Blood, you know,
Whoa.
war for oil, war for
Whoa.
oil. How much did we get?
Excuse me, John.
How much did we get?
I'm pretty confident it was Vice President Dick Cheney and what was the guy's
How
name?
much
George
oil
W.
did we
Bush,
get?
who told us we were going to pay for the war with Iraqi oil. That was the Republicans' view, not ours.
How much did we get out
You
of
could
the
at
whole
least
deal?
own your own policy, John.
Frankly, my point was the left said this whole thing was over oil, and we were going to take this oil. We didn't take any oil. We bought oil from them, and we were hoping to open the country and stabilize it so the oil production could continue. But this was never about oil. The problem is when you say, what is our intentions, this president wants a diminished America. And right now, when you look at the world, he is being largely successful. We're diminished. Russia is elevated, and chaos is blooming everywhere.
Russia's economy is on the verge of collapse for what's going
Well,
on now.
it'll be bolstered by the countries that it's going to systematically take over because of our weakness.
Well, there's not much evidence to support they have the capability of doing that.
Where do we stand with Russia right now?
Try telling that
we're in
to
a stronger
Ukrainians,
position.
Franklin.
We're in a stronger position than we were.
You have got to be crazy. You are absolutely insane if you think anybody is paying any attention to us, Franklin.
Well, our allies came to the table
Who would
and
that
joined
be?
us in the
Because
section.
Poland was an ally, and then we jerked the
I
missile
don't
defense out
know.
from under
Maybe
them.
you've heard of the English. You remember them, John?
Yeah, I remember this.
Are they our allies?
Well, I don't know.
Or are they
After
our
we sent
enemies?
Winston Churchill's
I don't know
bus
if there's
back
any
to
of them
them
left.
and sent a DVD of
Guess
Obama's
what, John?
speeches to the Queen.
80% of Americans say we should not get involved in Ukrainian.
You know what was the
in Ukraine.
what, Franklin?
Which
what was
part
the
of that are you not
what
paying attention to?
percentage
Why don't
of
we just
Americans said we shouldn't be involved in World
John,
War
is
II
it-
before we got bombed?
Is there any nation or any conflict you don't think we should take part in,
Franklin,
John?
you're missing my point. I'm talking about strength of our nation. This president has systematically, we've got generals in the field that are getting pink slips as we speak. 500 majors serving in Afghanistan are getting pink slips and being let go. Yeah, that's a real strong message to send to our enemies.
Our military budget is 16
He
times
slashed our military
larger,
budget.
16
I don't
times
care,
larger
Franklin.
than
We're
any of our
he
enemies.
used to be the leader of the world, and he is that was my point. He is systematically reducing American footprint in the world. And guess what? That may be what you all want, but when the world starts blowing up like it is, that's the result.
Okay, we're about to.
Oh, let me just finish one
All
thing.
right, I'm gonna let you
I
end it.
listened to 10 years of Republicans carping and complaining and telling Democrats, led by Bill Clinton, that we shouldn't be the policemen of the world. Those were the Republicans' position. And you know what else, John? That was your position. And it's only because now a Democrat has taken your position that you've changed.
Franklin,
The problem with your party is you switch fences every time
first
there's an
off,
election.
If you want the switch, Bill Clinton and the Democrats are the ones that set removal of Saddam Hussein as U.S. policy. But I'm not arguing with him being in Afghanistan. I'm arguing what I've always argued. We need a bigger footprint. This president has systematically emasculated our
when we tried
country.
to get involved in these other nations' conflicts, that it was a mistake. And now
Actually,
you
I
totally
didn't say
switched
that.
horses.
I didn't say that, Franklin. I never said that.
That would make you the only Republican
No,
in
it would
America
not.
that didn't say that then.
All right, okay. Even though we could send a bunch of natural gas to Russia and put everything.
Oh,
and
by
make,
the way,
and make everything
good
nice
news,
and
good
easy.
news, folks.
We can
the
move
predictions right now are that in the next 6 weeks, gas prices are going to fall below $3.
Thank
now.
you, private
sector. And that's because this president is so unfriendly to oil.
It is. Franklin, here's the deal. This president is taking credit for something he actually opposed.
It's not taking credit. He
Franklin,
didn't say a word
you
about
just
it.
tried to give him credit.
I
And
didn't
you
give him
know,
credit.
all right,
No.
Franklin, all right, let me
I'm
ask
not
you.
real happy
all right,
about
wait a
the
minute.
answer's been at
All the
$3.
time you come in here and
All right.
say that he's unfriendly
He
to
is.
oil.
He is.
And yet the news
All right, let me
just
ask you a
gets better
question.
and
Let me
better.
ask you a question, Franklin, point blank. Has production on federal land that he controls increased or decreased?
It's largely the same.
It's decreased.
You know what happened.
Franklin, I'll bring the numbers into you next week.
Okay,
He has
okay,
decreased.
It's not increased.
It
I'll
is
give you that.
decreased. So all of this increased oil
but so
production
what?
is in spite of the president's
So what?
policy. He's actually working against the very thing you're bragging on. He's
He'll have
trying
it-
to reduce production.
He'll have it all unionized before we know it. So let's move on to the next question. Let's talk about the border, and we only got about 5 minutes, so let's get into the good meat. What about our border? What's going to happen next?
Well, I don't know. The Republicans can't make up their mind.
Actually, we passed a bill, and the Senate Democrats left town.
No, they
We
passed the bill after the Senate.
Well, they should have stayed.
Why? Nobody
Because
thought
we
you
were
could
passing
pass
a bill.
anything.
We passed a bill.
You
Where
couldn't-
are the
yeah,
Democrats?
First of all, they humiliated their own speaker. They didn't support
Franklin,
his bill.
whatever they did, they passed a bill. Did they
I wanna
pass
get
a
it
bill
in.
or not?
Hold on.
Have the
No, hold on a
Republicans
minute.
passed a
Hold
bill?
on. And then what did they do? They actually filed a lawsuit against the president, alleging that he was exceeding his authority. And the very next day, the person who filed the lawsuit went on TV in a press conference and said the president should exceed his authority on the border.
Franklin, did they pass a bill in the House?
Who, by the way, your favorite pundit, Charles Krauthammer, went on Fox News and said it was the most ridiculous
I don't
display
disagree.
he ever saw.
But Franklin, did they pass a bill? Democracy's messy, but the House Republicans passed a bill. They passed a bill, they sent it to the Senate, and the Senate Democrats left town.
So
why
did
didn't
the
Senate,
Republicans, didn't they?
Why didn't the Senate come
Didn't
back?
the Republicans
well,
leave town?
Franklin, who controls the Senate chamber?
Didn't the Republicans
Yes, they
leave town?
did. But guess what,
Okay.
Franklin?
So are they around to work
Harry
on it?
Reid controls the Senate. Every Senate Republican could come back, and Harry Reid would still have the doors to the chamber locked. Harry Reid controls the Senate. The president, if he wanted it passed, all he had to do was ask the Senate to come back in session. It happens all the time.
They passed a bill to provide essentially 1/8 of the resources the president requested
Guess
to
what?
deal
That's
with the
how
crisis.
democracy works, Franklin. One side says one thing, one side says another, and they work it out somewhere in the middle. This is not a complete win-lose.
And that would explain why the House has passed less legislation than any Congress in 90 years.
Well, actually, they've passed 195
years.
bills that have died in the Senate.
90
this year
years.
alone, 195.
The least productive
Guess what,
House
Franklin?
of Representatives in
Folks,
90 years.
I'm glad
I
he's
thought
saying that.
Obama
Wait,
was going to work with us.
Harry Truman was famous for dealing with what they called the do-nothing Congress, and that Congress passed 5 times
All
more
right, folks,
legislation than this one.
Hang on. I'm glad Franklin said that, and I knew he was going there because that's a Democratic talking point talking about Harry Truman. Guess what, folks? That's the difference between a progressive liberal like Franklin and a
Harry
conservative
Truman.
like me. No, listen. I'm going to explain this
Another
to you.
progressive.
In my case, I think Congress not doing things is actually a lot of the time a good thing.
And that's
Franklin
what you've
says
got,
it's a
the
bad
gridlock
thing.
that you complain about,
pile.
you've
I'm not
created.
complaining about it. I'm not complaining. I'm complaining about Harry Reid not passing anything Republicans pass in the House. But all in all, I'm okay if they don't do a whole lot because most of what they do, like the last time they did a big thing, was Obamacare. And by the way, Franklin, why don't you answer the question that the White House wouldn't answer? When he had control of the House and Senate from 2008 to 2010, why didn't the Democrats pass comprehensive immigration reform then?
Wait a minute, I'm shaking my finger.
Because
I'm running.
Because we couldn't get enough votes to
You
actually have a vote
Franklin,
in the Senate.
that's not true. That is an out and out untruth. He had both houses, both Senate majorities. Why didn't he do it? Franklin, answer the question. Why didn't he do it? Why didn't he do it?
We got them from Nancy Pelosi.
Here's the facts right now. There are enough votes that would have Democrats and Republicans to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill today.
33 Democrats voted for the bill the House passed last week.
There are enough votes right now, and it would pass with bipartisan
33
support.
Democrats voted
and
last
the
week.
Republicans in the House won't let it come up for a
33
vote.
Democrats voted last week
Isn't
for
that
what
true,
the
John?
did the
Isn't that
Democrat
true?
No, Franklin, it's not true.
It is true.
We don't look. We're in the majority. We don't agree with it. Guess what, Franklin? We didn't agree with Obamacare, but you
have
people
this
were in
goofy
charge
rule,
and you forced it
because
through.
you have this goofy rule that unless a majority of Republicans will vote for it, it
You
can't
mean
even
like
come
you all
up
did
for a
with
vote.
Obamacare behind closed doors?
No.
You still didn't answer the question. Why didn't he do it when he had control of
Because
both
we
houses?
couldn't
and
shut the debate
That's
down.
not
in the
true,
Senate.
Franklin. That is
It is
absolutely not
It
true.
is true.
How'd
All
you
right.
do Obamacare then?
Steve,
How'd
this
you get Obamacare through? At the same time, how'd you do that?
They shut the doors.
Folks, he didn't do it. He gave a promise to the American people. He didn't do it, and now he's demagoguing on it. By the way, Franklin, just for your information, in the last year alone, family unit apprehensions at the border are up 493%. And, folks, just so you have something else to sleep tight on tonight, Ebola country people, over 1,000 people from the Ebola region nations in Africa have been apprehended crossing our southern border this year alone.
All right.
Apprehended. Isn't that what you want to have happen?
Well, Franklin, you think they apprehend 100%? And even after apprehended, folks, guess what they're doing? 90% don't show up for their court date, and he's busing them all across the country. So this president very easily could be busing Ebola all the way across the country.
I'd like to ask Tom Cry and Bob Burris what they think about the border situation real quick.
My solution, first you close the border, and then you deal with the problem. You have to stop the inflow, and then you deal with giving green cards or get them in the.
That'd be the simple way to do it.
That's a simple way to do it, but Howard, nothing is simple in Washington. What we've seen here is similar to what the parallel is with the city and county on why we can't negotiate locally with these two gentlemen here.
There we go.
By the way, a new Fox News poll says that 41% of the people, including 37% of Democrats, say the president no longer really wants to be president, that he's just biding time.
He's only got one thing going for him. In all the polls, Republicans actually poll lower than he does.
And Congress is lower than that.
All right, let's take a break. We'll see you next week.
Hey,
Bye-bye now.
enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back